welcome. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Hope you've all had a amazing Sunday and things are going fab for you. G'day, Barry. Lovely to see you. No wine tasting tonight. I'm going to sub you in. Yeah, hope everybody's had a great weekend. The weather has been absolutely stunning, I guess, even today with a bit of that cloud pushing in. Can't complain, actually. Well, no one listens anyway, but it has been a gorgeous weekend, and we're going to have a look very shortly about what's coming ahead, and if there's any rain on the horizon, or actually even any weather on the horizon would be a great start, because it has been, even though it's been beautiful in terms of sun and warmth and some mild temperatures, really in terms of the good old H2O stuff, it has been incredibly deficient. But some models are hinting at maybe a change in the moisture situation for next week, but nothing is locked in. I must say it's not a very strong signal at this point. So let's not get too excited, unfortunately. But that's the way it is. But anyway, let's get into it. We're going to have a look at obviously the current situation and look at what's going on with the weather at the moment. We can see beautiful, pretty nasty polar low spinning up there off southwest WA, with plenty of cold air wrapping around to it. We can see it's in the process of actually becoming cut off, and that's when it is basically detached from the westerly feed that keeps it going and keeps it nice and obviously deep and unstable. But we can see here that pool of cold air to the south of it. I mean, you start to see some serious stuff appearing here just as it starts to get captured and sort of cut off. But there's not a lot of moisture, as you can see. So even though it's quite a decent polar low, not much moisture flooding into it. So there's really nothing at all that's helping it wind up, unfortunately. But Southwest WA is doing quite well out of it. We stick the radar on as well. We will see that they've got plenty of cold air showers over the back there. Otherwise, it has been pretty quiet in terms of everywhere, for the whole country. We can see the rest of it in the east there. We can see a large slab of autocumulus and stratocumulus, which is associated with this sort of frontal activity, just a little bit of moisture being dragged into it, and also a bit of a ridge convergence going on. So we saw some showers off the coast this morning. That sort of unstable sort of part moved through. It's going to overload sometime today. Come on, windy. Otherwise, it has been drier than a dead dingoes, whatever that saying goes. I think it goes something like that. But and not going to change in the early foreseeable future. I can't even speak tonight, and windy can't even do its job. Come on, chop chop, let's go. People are waiting to see this. You've been mucking around there in the background. Chop 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 chop. Otherwise, it's dry. But that will allow obviously nights to be lovely and crisp. It's just not loading at all. Here we go. There we go. Come on, Mr. Windy. So not much at all. You can see some showers moving there. You can see definitely some banding. But again, the moisture's so limited. Even the cold fronts are really having trouble tapping into stuff. And you can see just off the coast here, the ridge from the other high sort of moving off. You can see what's causing that convergence band, and it weakened again sort of this afternoon as that bit of southeasterly surge pushed in. You can see here, this moisture is basically just pushing in ahead of that, but it's really not. It's stable moisture. There's really no benefit of it other than just clogging up the sky and bringing cool temperatures to central New South Wales. Expected some of that will start to push east overnight, some of that cloud. And you can see some of it actually forming on the ranges now. So we just sort of zoom into our sort of neck of the woods and let Windy have a nervous breakdown because of that. We'll actually go out a bit because this time of the afternoon, we're not going to see a real lot. There's the visible sat pick will switch off, and we'll get the infrared one take over, which is not as good for details, but well, maybe it might take over, put in tomorrow maybe. We can see this is just that sort of the leftover ridge converging with system coming from the west. You really can't even call it a trough. You can't really call it a front. It's just really just basically some mid-level moisture. With that, you can see beautiful here across that, the Victorian. This is just sort of southern or southwest New South Wales. You can see it looks pretty, but the radar switched on. You can see the radar is dead because there's just moisture trapped under an inversion. It's not getting high enough to really cause any major sort of raindrops. You can see there's a little bit of drizzle over here near Mildura, but really, when the moisture gets trapped so low in the atmosphere, it doesn't really get to coalesce, into major raindrops, even to drizzle. It just stays this fine, misty sort of trash, and as a result, you get this blanket-like appearance. Beautiful, quite pretty looking in the satellite picture, but nothing in effect that's useful. And you can see really here that sort of demarcation about the old ridges that's dying out, and the wind's coming in, so that wrapping around, and you can see here just where that next air mass sort of just lies. It's almost like you can draw a line basically, and that will slowly progress to the east overnight, and gives a bit of cloud, and that's about it, unfortunately. But it will clear out, or it should clear out tomorrow. That's what the last models did say. But what they've been like lately. They've been up and down, up and down. Now, Access C did have some sort of showers, a risk on the coast tonight. I'm not sure. We can see here the stuff off the coast isn't very strong when windy decides it's going to load. So I wouldn't be holding my breath too much, to be fair. But we'll release some positive energy and hope for the best. But yeah, it ain't going to be happening, I don't think. I don't know, maybe sometime next week when windy loads. Hello, knock, knock, Mr. Hamsters, get moving, chop, chop. But yeah, we are under the influence of pretty stable high pressure systems. The SAM has, we'll look at it very shortly. SAM's gone back to neutral territory. The IID is neutral territory. ENSO's obviously we know is in El Nino, but again, it really hasn't started to massively affect us. And this is quite normal for July, to be honest. Late July, early August. Don't forget, this is our driest time of the year. This is when we tend to just get those polar westerlies where they give Southern Australia a decent drop, but for us, they end up, as they get across the Great Dividing Range, they dry out, and all we get is that gusty, skin shredding, moisture sucking result. But we're lucky this year we're not getting the winds, but we are definitely getting the dry air still. And that's probably about where the state of things. The temperatures today, I didn't even get the chance to look at temperatures, but it seemed like a nice day, and I don't think it's really need to review it. Because let's be honest, nothing much happened. All right, we're going to pop in now and have a check out of what is ahead for us, and our beautiful new updated climate outlook that I spent all morning doing. Welcome. We're looking at the end of winter, which is August, of course, then spring and summer. We've grouped them up. We're not going to go individual months through the other ones because things get lost. Although we can pull them up and have a look if we need to, but we've got it all there. Let's have a look. But I realize that it's out of order. We're going to go put that up here. And we'll look at that next. So, everyone, we're going to look at the anomalies for the basin month to date. This is my brand new map that I've also been working on now. It's a 3D topographic map. I just love it because it actually shows the nuance about just the undulations and sort of the how topography influences a whole range of things for us. And I love it. So we can see here, basically, this is the max temp anomalies to date for July so far. You can see both sort of south and sort of north. It's been 0 to 0.5. So I've sort of said between minus 0.5 and plus 0.5 is pretty much, what's expected. I don't, it's ridiculous about 0.2 to 0.2. Like, my God, a bird farts near a thermometer and you might get 0.2 increase. And that's just ridiculous. You blame that on anything other than just a local variation. So I'm put 5.5 to minus 0.5. So generally speaking, the north here and the northeastern pretty much within that, and again the south as well. And then of course we've got between 0.5 and 1 degree above the July average for the sort of slab of the rest of it, except for this little pokey hole here. And I absolutely believe 100% there's actually, because there's not many gauges in here too, so just the airport and obviously the CBD, and I've just sort of smoothed it around, generally speaking, because the nearest gauges across Bankstown and obviously Colonel, Cronulla, up here in Manly, and obviously up to Hornsby, that sort of stuff. So and but Para only reports twice a day, so it's a bit hard anyway. But generally speaking, I've just basically smudged it there, so there's some sort of visual. But clearly, this is urban heat island effect here, or UHI, both for the airport and for the OBS air fryer hill. And I can tell you why. We've had quite a bit of a westerly to northwesterly flow from a lot of the month, but it hasn't been like blasting it. It's just been sort of moderate. And you think about where the airport AWS is. It's actually towards, if you're looking at the airport here, it's actually towards the main runway, towards the sort of, what would you say, the sort of southeastern side, I think it would be. Yeah, maybe the southwestern, west southwestern side of the airport. So when you get these northwesterlies blowing in, basically the air's, and if it's not strong, it's coming right across all that tarmac, and that's gonna have to impact temperatures on the air. But it's just got no doubts in my mind that it does, and we don't know what sort of homogenization, or which is we all call tweaks, but what the Bureau does to make adjustments for that. But they do that post in the month when they put up those maps, whereas we just on what's available on the website is just basically the raw data, which is what the actual temp was. So I can only run off what's actually on their site at the moment, and it says the airport's plus 1.8 and the CBD is plus 2.5, and that's pretty clearly UHI, because anything around there is definitely under 1. In fact, the highest one after that I think was zero point 0.8. Somewhere, I think even Bankstown's only like 0.6 or something like that above, the average. So, maybe 0.8, maybe itself, but it just basically scrapes into so that the yellow. So like the rest of the max temps are pretty much between sort of 0.6 and 0.8, which is not massive if you think about it. Like I think the average temperature for July is like 16, so you're looking at put 16.8 what it is, or that's not a huge difference, to be honest. I mean, you should really anything below it, between -1 degree and +1 degree really should be just written off as just like standard variations, to be honest. But anyway, we are. This is where we're at. But yeah, that red blob there is really something that's a problem child, and the Bureau's just done nothing about addressing it for a long time. I know that the airport's been there for a long time, Obs Hill's been there for a long time, but realistically, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be addressed. You cannot have the capital city and basically one of its major reporting stations, which is Mascot / the airport, which have been around since I think 1941 or something like that, sitting on just basically a heat engine, and it takes a brief wind change, and next thing the temps can spike 2 degrees above anywhere else. I mean, I quoted that classic example only a few weeks ago where Sydney was the warmest place between, I think it was southeast Queensland, northern New South Wales, right across to sort of central WA on the coast. Like, that's just stupid. It's no way it is, and there's no way in hell when in a consistent air mass, where especially in winter, you get very little variation, because obviously the heating's not as significant as you get in summer. There's very, very rarely, such a huge variation during the day. That is, night time's a bit different, obviously, because of radiational cooling and those impacts. But during the day, max temps very rarely differ by much between the coast and the west, unless there's there's some sort of geostrophic wind. There's a gusty northwesterly, or there's an onshore feed, for example, and there's plenty of cloud on the coast and there's no cloud in the west. They're rare examples, but come on, to be 2 or 3 degrees above everywhere across those areas screams, UHI, and they've done nothing about it. I mean, they don't even take wind at Obs Air Fry Hill anymore. That's done somewhere else. I think they even take it off the harbour, which is again another joke, because the harbour is again another microclimate as opposed to Obs Hill. And Obs Hill is, I think, 20 or 30 meters at least higher than Fort Denison, for example, where the winds are taken. I mean, it's just, if you in terms of in this day and age, where in terms of we're talking about bringing in these equalization and these taxation regimes, which is about making the economy transition to less carbon reliant, whatever you might want to call it these days. And one of your major capital cities doesn't even get proper weather data, because it's split across a couple of sites, and it's basically stuck in the middle of the city near some air conditioning exhaust vents. I mean, come on. It's just an absolute joke. And it's annoying the media don't call that out either, because they're too busy sucking off the taxpayer teeth and being sycophants to hopping on the old grifter chain. and we all know what it is. I don't know if you don't, if you saw some media the other day, I managed to sort of grab the end of it, but most of our main media companies across both state and federal get taxpayer funds. Why? I don't know, but when that happens, they're obviously going to be very reluctant to call anything out, to address anything, to even say how it is sometimes. And so, of course, then it's left to sort of the more fringe media types, like Sky News and other sort of stuff like that on one side of the fence, and on the other side of the fence, maybe SBS, probably, but more that like the Guardian and things like that, I guess, is what you probably would equivalate between Sky News on one side and the Guardian on the other. They need to call things out, and of course, it comes from that sort of more fringy type media. People automatically dismiss it. Oh no, not Sky News After Dark. Oh, I'm the Guardian. When they're hippies in their long hair, armpits, and that sort of stuff. But realistically, it needs to be addressed. If we're looking at this stuff and we're looking at reshaping, the way we live and our economies, you should be basing it on scientific data, and it's not scientific at all in most of Sydney. Um, and they say, oh, we've got satellite temperatures. Well, satellite temperatures aren't overly accurate either. They're cut out. You've got cloud cover. Get a whole range of stuff that impacts them. All you need to do is get a CME, which is the coronal mass ejection from the sun. You get some, a stream of plasma knocks out satellites, interferes. A whole range of stuff goes wrong. And yeah, and to be fair, the Bureau have actually pushed back quite a few times against, the government's funding issues. And I was actually having a fascinating discussion on in DMs the other day. I think it's with Mr. P, who asked a question about why this sort of stuff happens and why there's not general pushback, or why. And my opinion is it's really comes down to that financial grift side. Like, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Really, that's to me all I can look at, because genuine scientists would have concern about data collection for a start. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I do work in stats and data and a whole range of stuff. And the standard is, and there's international standards too, by the way, about data. The holes and the discrepancies and the collection methods you see for weather data, you wouldn't use if you were an economist. You wouldn't use making decisions about people's health, for example, and all that sort of stuff. You wouldn't use it. Some of it's just trash. But lo and behold, we use it to make a whole range of decisions that can affect our standard of living, about our energy sources, and a whole range of stuff. Now, like, I'm not on any bandwagon here for any energy source. I just want to make sure that when we make decisions, that everybody's it's the best data, they're informed. And we've all seen how crap the weather models are, even just a couple of days before. Like, I say this all the time. Like, we even saw the rainfall for June, where the world, the world's best climate models ran and said it's going to be dry and then up wetter. Like, you can't get it right 1 month ahead. Like, you're not going to get it right multi-months ahead. So I don't understand why people don't push back on that. Like, you're not going to ignore the fringe lunatics on both sides and just look actually at what's on offer. But the problem is, you've got scientists again who don't want to bite the hand that feeds it, so they go with the flow. That's the easiest way these days. Do you want to stand out? Anyway, that's my rant done. And I was only ranting because when I was researching this stuff today, I was just like, there's so many holes in the data, and you can see things sticking out to me, even just like not a climatologist, but definitely got experience and qualifications in about statistics and data and that sort of stuff. I just like look at it and think, oh, we've never used that in any line other than, of course, in climate and weather. Anyway, let's go look at the min temps. Now, this is not unsurprising, and I'm pretty sure most of us would agree anyway, because we know it's especially towards the start of the month how just muggy and sort of that humidity that was around the cloud cover at night time. And of course, that's always going to trap any radiation or cooling and stop it, so it keeps the warmth towards the surface, if you can call it warmth. But so there was only sort of most of the areas that actually did all right. strange enough, of course, not strange enough, ones that sort of didn't get a lot of the cloud cover at night time. And we think we had quite a bit of onshore flow for that start of July too. So, and there wasn't a lot of rain in it, but there was definitely like that sort of mid-level moisture that gets trapped under inversions and has that nighttime cloud, and then just banks up against, the Great Dividing Range and the Blue Mountains, for example, which is why you can see like Penrith and that sort of stuff in that sort of wind flow. We had that onshore flow direction it had more cloud around, whereas the places like Richmond and Windsor weren't as warm overnight, and that just in that 0.5 to 0.1. And I think Terry Hills is a weird little one. It was sort of out on its own, and generally I couldn't explain why they were sort of poking out itself, other than maybe when the mixing level came down a bit lower, which is where where the atmosphere, the surface atmosphere mixes with the upper atmosphere. So obviously, because the upper atmosphere brings a lot of cool air down, and if it mixes effectively, then the surface can cool better as well. Maybe that mixing level is down a bit lower around Terry Hills for a lot of the early month, or they've had just some big one-off cold temperatures that can tend to skew things. But yeah, not surprising. Hey, yeah, month in terms of minimums, and that's not unusual. Except for our lovely peeps down the Campbelltown and Camden Way. Shout out to Mr. Dine, hope he's well, and also our unofficial Mayor of Camden, and obviously Doctor Extraordinaire in all things lawn, and not just lawn, mind you. They do a lot of things out there at Camden Lawn Doctor, so they can look after your garden trash, they can look after your neighbourhood trash. Actually, no, he probably can't take your neighbourhood trash out. These days that's called kidnapping, but he looks after a whole range of stuff there. He does a mean hedge too. So if you need your merkin, or your nether bits sort of trimmed, I'm sure that he can get his clippers out and help you out. But yeah, feel free to hit up the unofficial mayor and the doctor of all things grass out there. And he's also said anybody who's a member of we really don't have membership, I guess, per se, but I see is a nerd, a City Weather Nerd. He gives 10% discount as well. So make sure you mention that you're obviously part of us, and he will definitely look after you. He's got a website as well, so Lawn Doctor Camden, I think, is the URL if I remember. But he's putting in the chat, so you can probably drop down his URL if he's around. And yeah, that southern people did pretty all right. Otherwise, the rest of us, gluggy, sort of warmer nights, not unusual, not unexpected with the cloud. It is what it is, I guess. All right, we're going to look now at the rainfall for the basin. We can see here the impacts of really those onshore flows, and how the topography does actually sort of focus. So you can see really here that even that just a raised area around that northern beaches stuff definitely helps the coastal strip, and then sort of starts to taper off as it slips over the hills. And this area here definitely gets a bit of a rain shower effect, especially when we had that onshore flow for days and stuff on end, and decent showers. And don't forget, a lot of this stuff on the coast who came in a couple of days. Was it last week? It's so long ago now, I can't remember. But a week, it was a couple of 30 mils falls just overnight. So it's not been a wet month per se. When you look at this, you think, oh, wet. No. Take those 10 falls away, and most of the places are sort of 10 to 15 mils for the month total. Interesting little tongue down here, and I'm just wondering that again, that's a bit of a collection of sort of the onshore flow sort of pooling around here and being squeezed. But the place around here like Holsworthy and the back of sort of Lucas Heights and sort of area between Liverpool and those sort of areas did not too bad. I mean, they had sort of 30s, but you only slept a few k's south, and Camden and Campbelltown I think have had like 13 and 15 mils respectively, or something like that for the whole month total. So that 20 mils variance in over a short dust distance just goes to show that there was a very sort of shallow, limited sort of moisture that we had when those even when those onshore flows were happening and those winds pushing ashore. It wasn't the usual sort of deep, moist column that we love to see where it gets decent rain out of it. It was very much localized stuff where winds pooled, or there was a bit of a local feature that helped sort of squeeze those extra drops out of it. But yeah, same as here. Like I think there's definitely some sort of topographic effects here in the CBD, especially that Rose Bay in this area here. It's just doing those sort of rain figures, looking at it. I think it's that's a damn wet little spot. I think it may even push Terry Hills out pretty for the wettest spot in the whole of the metro area, I think. consistent good fall, especially with that onshore flow. I think where Terry Hills will definitely obviously do better is when you get that the lifting that comes even just from that brief sort of hill range that's there. You wouldn't call it an escarpment, but even the lifting alone would definitely help some falls in the eastern side of it. But yeah, generally speaking, a dry month. Not good. We did, but we remember we talked about this in June, and we did flag that July was probably going to be wetter. Then CFS sort of threw some spanners and said, "Oh, it might be wetter than expected." But now at this stage, it's been smoking some stuff unless there's a major rain event between now and I think when's the end of the month, Thursday or Friday. Yeah, ain't going to be ain't going to be changing. And there's nothing on the models. We'll see. We'll have a look at them very shortly. And pretty indicative of that lack of moisture but lack of climate drivers too. At this stage, and there really is nothing driving. And people think that Enzo is, and obviously El Nino, it's just starting to have effects, but still early on in the season, it's going to be more, the northern parts first, and then the starvation of moisture from fronts coming past and grabbing it down, and troughs coming past and grabbing that down and tapping into it, is going to be fairly limited. So. That's when we'll probably start to really take a notice. In fact, it'll be spring. I think we'll notice that it'll really bite us hard, because you won't have the SAM helping us out with moisture, and sort of even if it just drags a little bit down, cold air with a little bit of tropical moisture is always better than tropical air with no moisture or even limited moisture. So yeah, I think that's sort of mid-August onwards we're going to really start to see that. Sort of gnawing at our bones, but again, we'll see what the CFS says later too if we want to have a look at that, and then definitely throwing some interesting scenarios out. Surprise, surprise. All right, let's go into our cute little rainfall. Oh, well, not rainfall. New climate outlook. So really, I know it says December, but it's really like an average. But there's three key things that I was looking at. We've got obviously the rainfall outlook, we've got the temperature outlook, and I was looking at the general weather, especially the SST anomalies, and which are obviously keeping pretty warm off us. Now, that doesn't always equal improved precipitation impacts or probabilities for us, especially during the cooler months, because we don't get those onshore flows that often, and when we do, they're often on the end of a high or some sort of cold air pool that's sitting over the Tasman. So the capacity for the air to actually drag a lot of moisture onshore is still quite limited. Where those anomalies come into play and can be very helpful is when we start to see the season switch and we start to get those northerly air masses start to penetrate, and then the warmer air can drag more moisture on, and then that's when it can really contribute, which is sort of that springtime. So, at this stage, spring's looking pretty dry, I must say. But towards the start of it, anyway, towards the end of it, who knows? CFS is doing its usual excitement, but that's when we get to start to see the impacts of that localized sea surface temperature, moisture, and see just how it can contribute to anything that happens to come by us. But really at this stage, drier into August. You can see here, dry September, October, some recovery. And then there's a pretty strong wet signal in the CFS. Now, it's the only model we've got. So, I'm not cherry picking. It's the only one got available to us. NEMA it is, and the other climate models and Copernicus don't update till later this week. So really, we've only got CFS to go off, and we want to have something to look at. So that's what it is at this stage. But yeah, it's looking interesting. We'll pull it up very soon. It's definitely upgraded since we saw it last, even since we saw it last week. So interesting times ahead, whether it's going to go head to head with the rest of these climate stuff, and we get interesting to see what they've got to throw at us. But again, that's what it says in terms of moisture. We can see the next 6 weeks. There's a bit of a wet pulse around next week. Again, I've been flagging for a little while now about that sort of signal around, but it's not strong. So I think that's to even call it a wet pulse, I was sort of grasping at straws. But there's no really other sort of way to. I was going to say wet trickle, but it really doesn't give you that sort of visual, does it? looking into the temp outlook, of course, surprise, surprise, it's a bit warmer. We did see that there is a bit of a cooler dip actually across northern Australia, which is interesting. And I'm just wondering if that's maybe late spring, some cloud, which does suggest, and it could possibly be a passing northwest cloudy band, for example, that can significantly lower temperatures even just for a couple of days, and that can crash across and cascade across averages for that month. But the other signal is about, we talked about last week, and we'll see it shortly, about Enzo starting to wind down earlier than usually happens, and you get that rebound effect. So that's definitely something keeping an eye on. But you can see here, this is both max and min temps average, mind you, so it's not saying both day and night are going to be warmer. This is just the average again. But you can see there's a real strong heat pulse as spring winds up and starts to move into summer, and that's clearly when Enzo and El Nino is really expected to peak, as we saw last week, and will look very soon. Again, as I said, the Enzo models, even NOAA, haven't updated as yet. The last update for them was the 19th or something of July, so we don't really have any up-to-date SST temperatures for you, unfortunately, so we're just going off what we saw last week. But we did see that peak, and that starts to ease, and then almost, you can get, almost creeps into the rapidly ease as you get into January, so late January. So rebound effect, let's hope we see that lovely happens this time around. But the good thing about that is that there's still be plenty of warmth around, but it will start to let moisture in too. So we should see a fairly stormy period, I think, but only for a couple of days. Don't think it's going to be stormy the whole time, and then of course we'll go back to your normal seasonality. But you'll get these storm outbreaks. So fingers crossed we get that. But generally speaking, we've got like a dry, warm / hot period coming up, especially through spring. And then we will hit a bit of a humid, wet phase. Hard to say, but looks like midsummer, maybe earlier, maybe a bit later, just depending on exactly when we start to see El Nino take a hike. But generally speaking, we've got a drier period coming up. There's going to be pretty more westerly bursts coming, which always ends up for us being obviously dry, like we've seen. I don't think at this stage I didn't see like a huge shift towards those horrific winds we get in August. But in saying that, if there's a westerly wind burst like a burst of wind coming, then we start to expect that there's going to be some, at least, of those gusty, horrific nor'westerlies that we so love and treasure. But in saying that, generally speaking, as I said, there's no climate drivers at all at this stage, aside from El Nino. But again, its impacts for us still quite restrained at this stage. All right, let's have a look at the Enzo update. As I said, there's really nothing to show you, so I just wanted to show you this is the strongest dip we've seen in the SOA, which is a Southern Oscillation Index, obviously, which is basically the balance in air pressures between Tahiti and Darwin, and that is to capture the general Walker circulation, which is really what the circulation is that drives the major weather systems. And within that, of course, you have the Hadley cells and Ferrel cells, and of course you have the ITCZ, or the monsoon trough, all the features that are within that general Walker circulation. And of course, it's named after the guy meteorologist who discovered it back in, I think it was at the late 1800s, early 1900s. Can't think of the top of my head, but anyway, he identified this. Clever man. I don't know how he did with that. No science that days, and maybe some balloons and bits and pieces, but incredible. Anyway, back to my point before I get lost. So it's the strongest drop we've seen in that since 97. Those who may have been interested in weather back in the 90s or remember that 97 El Nino was pretty nasty, but it did get rebounded and followed by a pretty strong, very wet, but it's not necessarily strong, but a decent La Nina the year after. But it wasn't because of the values, again, because you get all these sites who fall for it's minus 30, so it must be, oh my God, it's the end of the world type of stuff. And this La Nina in 97, 98, if I remember, was it? Yeah. And then also progressing, you can see here, wasn't overly strong in terms of the values, but it was very wet. If you remember that and it was probably exacerbated by the fact we had quite a lean dry period here for many years. We can see here between basically sort of end of 95 right through to sort of 97, started, I think it was like start of 98 if it was, and then it broke. We had quite a wet phase through until the mid 2000s, and we had sort of had a drier phase here, and then we sort of up and down, and we have been quite through a wet phase here. So we've been sport quite recently. So the drier thing that this El Nino is going to bring is going to seem worse or more exacerbated because we have seen it being so wet. So just bear that in mind when someone wants to be Nancy negative and slap around and wear sackcloth and gnash their teeth and sort of go on the street and light candles. Our perception is obviously very limited to recent past, and recent past has been reasonably wet for rain, or consistent for rain anyway. So just to remind them, hey, well, there was periods of time not long ago that was drier than this for a long time. So just balance it out. Don't forget those memories. And yeah, I just wanted to say that's stronger since that period of time. And in fact, 97 was still stronger than what we've seen at this stage. And you can see the dots is where it's sort of forecasted sort of heading at this stage. 97 is still pretty much ahead of it. It's almost got to minus 30 in the value, which is, this is why I laugh at those people who talk about this is unprecedented. And I'm like, do you remember back to the 90s? Like there was some pretty decent values back in the 90s, and it was pretty nasty and dry. In fact, I think there was quite widespread droughts, if I remember, at the time. So yeah, but we're in an El Nino, shock horror. And you can see here, it's been pretty consistently sort of falling since about early this year. But that was, it wasn't really La Nina, and that's pretty misleading. It was more just like a wet neutral, to be honest. It wasn't. We had decent rain, obviously, but I'm talking about other sort of areas of the country. So, yeah, that's where the Enzo is at this stage. I think, as I said, I really start to think we'll see the impacts, especially in spring, where we start to want that moisture to be dragged down from the tropics. It's not going to be there because of the El Nino starving it, and that's when we'll start to see some pretty significant impacts for us. But again, couched upon exactly how long that will last. And let's have a look at the IOD. Again, dead as it all now. Like I thought about this because there's, again, one of these values where there's not a lot of actually information out there about the IOD, including up-to-date model predictions, mind you. But I want to show this cute little graph from the Japanese, and they actually love the IOD because obviously you can see it has pretty significant impacts upon their systems, and it displaces their weather systems, their high pressures, and obviously typhoon impacts and a whole range of stuff. And this gives you here a pretty good indication about a positive IOD. So you can see the warmer cluster of waters off the Horn of Africa and obviously the subcontinent. And you can see this blob of colder water, relatively speaking. Obviously not cold water because it's in the tropics. It's always going to be 28s and to 30s. But even like a degree difference there makes pretty significant change to what we can see. And this colder blob of sea surface temperatures here, what it does is it tends to make it stable because obviously the air's not going to rise as much, and then this warmer blob over here will cause air to rise more, and so of course air rushes to be where it's rising, and of course you get this persistent ridge and dry air. You can see this here is reinforced by these highs. So you've got the southern one, which is obviously reinforced again by the cold air and the feral cell air from the south Antarctic air wrapping up in colder dry air, and then the ridge is just wedged in here and going nowhere because of these colder SSTs. So definitely a good way, and that's why we're not getting a lot of northwest cloud. In fact, we get hardly any northwest cloud bands coming down, and because of this, you can see that the general steering flow is away from us as opposed to sort of dragging the moisture down. Now, upper systems will be actually dragging air down across us, but if that moisture is not getting up into the upper atmosphere, even mid-levels from that area here, which is where normally you get moisture being pumped up to those mid-levels and upper levels, which then the jet stream can drag across in these cloud bands and use to give us decent rainfalls. The whole sort of engine comes to a stop, which is what we're seeing. And this is just a sort of more recent update. You can see it's update, I think, a couple of days ago. Again, the Japanese are still going for this negative IOD, and the Bureau is still going for a positive drier IOD. So I guess we'll see. The catch-all for us is that we start to see its impacts for us, or any usefulness for us. It really starts to wane in sort of mid to late spring, and then by the time you get into summer, you've got a whole lot of other drivers that take over, and the IOD sort of gets relegated to waiting for winter again and autumn. So yeah, I thought you might be interested in just to see exactly why, how the IOD does impact us this time of year, and why their sort of cold SSTs sort of reinforce the dry weather. All right, going to SAM as well, like again, another sort of model that's, climate driver, that there's really not much updates, except, the Bureau updates every fortnight or something now. Thankfully, the Americans, or NOAA, actually do update it quite regularly, although they call it the AAO over there, don't forget, so the Antarctic something oscillation or something. So if you are searching, you want to look at this sort of stuff yourself in your own time, read about it, you need to search for AAO as opposed to SAM or Southern Annular Mode. Sometimes their sites will pick up Southern Annular Mode if you put the full word in, because they do have some references to it. But you can see here it was pretty much June when we had as wet, that wet period was pretty much into the positive. In fact, off the charts there at one stage there. And then we can see it's been rapidly declining into early July, and no surprise it sort of coincides with that dry weather. And you can see it's been sort of dipping down into negative, and the general model expectation for this SAM is that it will start to rebound back towards neutral, which again is reflected in pretty those rainfall charts. There's nothing driving it. There's no ID. There's no real ENSO at this stage, because it's still very much a Northern Australia thing, and there's no SAM to sort of help drag up moisture. Yeah, we're still looking again at those dry conditions, unless there's a local issue or something that can help locally, like a passing cold front, for example, or just a little bit of a trough, or you get one of these convergence zones like we've seen, and that's where those SSTs will come into play, because if there's nothing driving it, then you can generally expect that those sort of geostrophic winds, which is west east winds that you normally get, are probably going to be lighter, or you can maybe sort of light and variable, which will allow sort of that moisture, as we're going to see at the moment, actually a bit of moisture to push on shore. And if someone's lucky enough in the right space, the right time, there might be a bit of a squeeze and get a few drops out of the old air. But generally speaking, can't see a lot of moisture into yet. There's a bit of a bump there towards the end of July into August, and then we could see sort of maybe that rain event that we've sort of been talking about. All the models have sort of been flashing before our eyes a few times. That could definitely, that strong rebound there, could be symbolic of it. And the other thing to remember at the SAM too is it's highly reactive. It's very rarely predictive, because just the way the SAM is, it's very dynamic. It's more like a day-to-day thing, as opposed to other climate drivers like IOD and ENSO, which are weeks to months things. These are very much days to maybe a week at a time. So often this will reflect what's currently the situation, and maybe rebounds. For example, it's very rarely predictive, so it's sort of hard to rely upon. That's probably about it for the climate drivers. I want to quickly show you just what the next 6 weeks is going to be in terms of that, and I'm going to bring up CFS for you now. We'll look at that together. Just drag that across. And so we've got this is the end of July into spring. August. You can see that dryness persists. This is the interesting thing here, which is it's a tongue of tropical moisture sort of bending down into Queensland. So keep an eye on that. And this is a good way of verifying how CFS is doing, and this does actually sort of come about. And it's only this week too, so it's only a few days away. So we'll be able to see some rapid sort of verification. And if it doesn't happen, then we know CFS is definitely on some illicit substances. And then we're pushing into, I'll make this a bit bigger, I guess. Where is my zoom? Zoom. I did this last week, didn't I? Magnifier. No, not magnifier. Ooh. High magnifier. I did this last time. Why can't I adjust size? Nope. Oh my God. I know it's there, and I know I'm going absolutely blind. So just laugh at me while I try and think of where this view. Here we go. Zoom in. I did this last time, didn't I? There we go. Again, interesting setup. And if you think about what I just talked about in terms of the SAM and that rebound towards that positive, and that sharp rebound we see, and then you see this, which is in that exact sort of time frame when we saw that SAM rebound. Then obviously CFS is picking something up, and this looks very much like a trophy, sort of like a coastal trough situation. You can see that obviously the greatest accumulations are offshore, so it's definitely not lowy. It's probably a decent cold change, clicking on with some moisture coming in from the northeast or even the north as the high moves out. Maybe the high's a bit further south again, like we saw last time. Just enough moisture to tap on and just sort of pushing onto the coast. So fingers crossed. So this is the other fascinating feature I saw. We just saw, in terms of general speaking, really not really supported set up for this sort of stuff. So this looks like some sort of low actually, which is again unusual for August, but we'll see. All right, and then going into sort of the second week of August, which is now sort of heading towards the end of winter, and we can see really generally no, not wet, not drier, other than this slab into here, and that's definitely indicative of less moisture coming in from the north, which is where it tends to sort of clip the corner here. The ridge comes down and sort of drags moisture across, and if there's not so much moisture, or the coral seas being suppressed, which is clearly the case at the moment, or the West Pacific, then obviously the available moisture will be less. And this is obviously a bit of a concern for the southern areas and the snowies, lack of moisture here, which tends to sort of just generally speak like we're going into another sort of those weak pressure regimes where there's really nothing driving it either from a northerly perspective or a southerly perspective. It's just meh. And don't forget, most of Australia this time of year is basically dry anyway. So when it says average here, the average is like 3 or 4 mils at most. So, generally speaking, it's pretty within the model's tolerance. You can see here, it's like 5 to 5. So that's probably why it says white. Then heading in towards the end of winter, there's really no saving graces yet for the snow resorts of southern Australia. There's sort of no major fronts sort of forecast. A bit drier in terms of that, but again, there's really nothing happening at all. Queensland coast gets a bit of a rebound. You can see that this suppression here of the Coral Sea is sort of backed off a bit. You can see that yellow shading was a lot closer to the coast, is backed off, so that tends to say that there's pretty more of a southeasterly sort of trade winds pushing out, which is sort of pushing the dry air back out to the northeast, sorry. And then the end of winter, not surprisingly, drier. Quite a suppressed sort of looking at southern and southeast Australia there at this stage, and again, no drivers anywhere to even help. So that's pretty it's pretty an accumulation thing as opposed to sort of like a one type event. But it's pretty more the fact that there's again a few weeks of really not much happening, and you start to see this sort of dryness starts to sort of dam up. And then we push into the end of winter and the first first few days of spring. And you can see a bit of a change already in southern Australia, which is good. So you can see obviously some frontal activity starting to push in across there. Southwest WA still remains suppressed, so it looks like it's probably more localized effect here. And you can see, but most of New South Wales, coastal New South Wales is actually suppressed still, and right up into southeast Queensland, which does tend to suggest that it's the sort of it's the hangovers from the end of August and winter, and this could be the sort of spring starting to sort of poke its nose in. But I guess we'll see when it comes around, if it does come out, or it's just teasing us like it normally has been lately. And then quickly we'll have a look at what spring does bring us in terms of just generally. And I'm just going to pull it up for you. So this is just a month. Let's have a look. So August we saw already is pretty dry and pretty widespread negative anomalies. Not surprising there. And then we're heading now into September. This is temperatures. Duh. Awkward. Of course it's dry because it's actually air and not precipitation, you Dilbury. And if I open the one that says rainfall, then you know what? We would probably get rainfall, wouldn't we? Let's have a look here. So there we go. So August. So you can see that stuff off the coast, which we flagged about before, but generally speaking, there's pretty widespread, either average or negative anomalies starting to accrue, especially this. I think this is definitely the El Nino starting to bite a little bit in terms of moisture starvation. And then we're going to go into September, and you can see this is where I was talking before about El Nino starts to bite, because this is when the you start to get the build up for the transition for the northern wet season to start to sort of start cooking and getting away, and you can see here really, I mean, even the shading shows quite clearly that there's a real starving of moisture coming in from that the Coral Sea now as it's suppressed, and that's where El Nino is really starting to bite now, just really starving that whole eastern Australia of any moisture. You can see here the coast basically hangs on to average just, and that's probably a combination of some frontal activity and hopefully some storm activity too. But heading into October, good news for some of New South Wales, and including us. There is that little sort of green circle there, and that pretty does look suspiciously maybe like ECL-ish in sort of a spring ECL, but a spring ECL is pretty rare, so it's pretty more like I'd say it's some sort of onshore event. But generally speaking, you see pretty negative anomalies. But this is interesting here. And that's unusual in terms of because start to get into October, and then October is a very dry anomaly for Southwest WA, because you've got the build up happening here, which is the heat low is really starting to wind up. They've got a really dry southwesterly flow because of that. Obviously, the circulation in the low is quite large. And so it looks like that's being displaced by some sort of feature, and that looks coming like off the Indian Ocean. But it could be just one event too. Could be like a late sort of winter or early sort of mid spring sort of northwest cloud band, perhaps. Heading into November, and this is where I was talking about before, that massive change in signals. Now, I don't know if it's torment, but I mean, look at that. I mean, I think it's too good to be true, to be fair. But it could be one event too. It could be like one decent northwest cloud event. It could be like it could be a Rossby wave coming in off the Indian Ocean, dragging quite a decent cloud event across it. And don't forget, that time of year still pretty dry for most of Australia, actually, including New South Wales. So it would only take an event of 20 to 30 mils, and you're going to get this sort of anomalies straight away, and the rest of the month could be dry. So, and then we're going to pop into December. And the dryness continues for some areas, but the wetness continues. And now this is the thing I found interesting, because you can see Southwest WA is reasonably wet, but then this is very much trophy. You can see here that there's accumulation basically on the eastern side of the Great Dividing Range, and that definitely says not just the one event, but a general onshore decent flow, and it could be storms too, like a couple of storms. December again, it's not overly wet for us. It's starting to get better, but 2 or 3 storms drop its guts, and it looks better. And then, of course, putting into January, the wet signal continues. Again, one model, CFS, so this is just what we've got available to us. We're looking at it. But again, the eastern part, and then you can see that the El Nino really biting hard and across the northern tropics, and that's not good for them. So that's the interesting part here. It looks the moisture coming from the Indian. It's definitely not coming from the coral. But you can see here it's very suppressed. So again, for me, a big asterisk. That could be a red flag, but we'll see if it ever comes off or not. And then pushing into February, you can see again, this is Enzo or El Nino starting to die. You can see here very clearly that the moisture is returning. There's negative anomalies now just hugging the coast. And March can be incredibly wet for the tropics too, so it's not all over for them, and they can but this is the interesting here. Look at this recovery in terms of across the whole area. So this is the leftover of the last sort of part of El Nino for me, and this is just normally that sort of lag period, because you can see here a massive recovery right across the tropics, and that's it's well above getting to be well above their sort of average. So, and you can see it slowly, this anomaly is shrinking. So if we had March here, I reckon you'd see March would be pretty much a recovery for it, and whether it can get enough to sort of recover the all wet season, or it's going to finish with an anomaly. But the good news is for them is it looks like it's going to finish with a wet flourish, which is great for everybody in terms of that, because then we get moisture flowing down obviously from that as well. And then of course March systems can pick up that moisture, and that's when we can get some major rains across eastern New South Wales, because that combination of that starting to get some cooler air from the south and still the tropical moisture coming down from the north, and those two colliding always equals wet. Alrighty, let's have a look at what's going to what we've got coming ahead as well. We've got some stuff here. I'm just going to click on that for you. Let's have a look here. Oh, it's that time of the month. Let's have a look. We'll have a look at WTFs, and then we'll go in and quickly have a look what's ahead for us this week. But I've got to put this cover up because it's me obviously cringing. And let's go into WTAFs. And this week we've got um, uh, naming and shaming. Yeah, it's out there in public, so it's not really naming or shaming. It's anybody can Google and search, but it's definitely one of those ones where never post one screen grab from one model, and including where it's completely misread for a start. And if you look at that general flow there, um, it looks swirly. But there's quite a few things here that's, you'd have to say doesn't necessarily look like an ECL. It looks like a decent trough perhaps and maybe an embedded low, but, an ECL, you do really want that really tight gradient. It's got a bit of a tight gradient there, but yeah, saying good afternoon, not hitting any panic button, but of course, that's why the post is done. Like, why would they be posting it if they didn't want to hit any panic buttons for a start? And I can understand that you relate to high levels of anxiety, obviously not for storms, but I understand that people that do, like, girl, please, like, you post this for a reason. If the fact that you're mentioning that in your comments knows that you're aware of it, which means that you don't give a damn about it. Just saying. So a possible ECL next Thursday, and of course now Thursday is looking like absolute nothing happening. We'll look at that very shortly. So, it's don't post one screen grab from one model in as a laydown misere. Now, there could be some showers around on Thursday, but we'll see very shortly. But I'm 100% sure there's not going to be an ECL at this stage. The upper systems are just not at this stage conducive. There's no real blocking high. There's a whole lot of stuff that's missing. And not to say that we can we can't get an aggressive cold change on Thursday. In fact, that looking at some of the temperature models going forward, there is a bit of a cold air mass coming. So there's definitely something on the way for us to sort of start and welcome in August. But in terms of that, nope. Anyway. But this is the real reason why they do this, and it's because of these things here: 879 reactions, 121 comments, 40 shares, ka-ching, ka-ching. The grift is strong, and that is the whole purpose of that post. So, and as I pointed out before, whenever someone says this sort of stuff in the first few lines, it's a bit like I don't know if you were taught, but my grandmother taught me, and it's sort of one of those things I think it's pretty reasonably well known, maybe not, but she always said that whenever someone says something to you and then they say but, anything before that but, they don't believe or can be excluded. It's just there to fluff it up, to maybe to make the next part of that a little bit more palatable, digestible. But anything after but is what they really truly mean. So really here is like, not hitting panic balls, but da 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 da, which clearly is like, I'm just going to tick this box to make sure that people think that I'm caring about it, but realistically, I just want to get this out there because it's good for the grift. And so Newcastle and Central Coast Storm Chasers, you are our WTAF for the week. And thank you for that. Thank you for providing us again some lovely material. All right, we're going to have pop in now and have a quick look what's the go is for this week. We're obviously going to stop the satellite before Windy does have a breakdown and we have to call in the emergency services. Let's click on and we'll have a quick look on the base and have a look at what ECO Axis has actually been pretty good at this stage. So we're going to look at that and have a quick flick through. Windy's, if you've got Windy's subscription, they've actually gone through some decent upgrades lately too. So make sure you check it out. It won't need the 1 hour forecast of rain. You can see here it's pretty dry all the way through. There's Thursday's ECL for you. Sunny, westerly winds, dry as nuns, nasty, whatever the saying goes. A little bit cooler on older EC there. That's that consequence of that change coming through. But in terms of that, nah. There's little squeeze of moisture, as I flagged before, maybe on the on the Friday, maybe Saturday, but it's late and it's on the back of a southerly change. And there's the 3 GFS EC. You've got it. Meteor Blue is it's a sort of a byproduct of EC. It's not necessarily the same model, but they do. I do believe they use raw EC data for Meteor Blue. Well, there might be is that the French one? No, Media Blue is the Swiss one, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe they use the French data as well. But anyway, at this stage, there's some agreement there. It looks like a decent sort of wet cold change, I think, at best. But again, that's late next week. It's Friday. It's a long way away. I would be putting no reliance upon it whatsoever. That mind you, that rain thing's been there for a few days now, and it's pushed out from Wednesday to Thursday to Friday. So yeah, if it keeps pushing out the way it is and doesn't lock in, then you can bet your bottom dollar it's just one of those things where the models hallucinate. Around that sort of 8 to 9 day range, it's always a rain event. Can bet your bottom dollar, and ain't gonna happen. But again, looking at that, it's still pretty dry. Start of August, you can see here's the last month of winter. Maybe another cool change around that period of time, but really nothing much happening whatsoever in terms of that. Yeah, access has been a little bit interesting of late. It's been absolute slopping all over the place. So, and it keeps throwing these things out. Maybe it's taken over GFSs are on or throwing out something, but really, like, it throws the events out, and then 2 or 3 days later, you check this tomorrow morning, and it'll be completely gone. So, I mean, even check it tonight. I think once the zero Z run comes out. So, but in the next 5 days or next for this week at all, as the sort of sneak peek, nothing happening. As I said, maybe Thursday, maybe Friday, late Friday, maybe with a change. But again, I wouldn't hold anything to it. And you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 mils most for the coast, maybe 0.5 a mil, 1 mil in the west. So it's only just like a buffet type southerly change when I can see. Otherwise, nothing else happened. But there is a pretty decent cold surge coming in tomorrow, and I think that's sort of a consequence of some of the cold air coming across us tonight. And again, that this cold change here on Wednesday afternoon, and you can see it's going to be one of those westerlies. So obviously to the south. And we're going to get this sort of dry air, but it's pretty nippy. You can see here, even Mins on the coast down to sort of single figures there. So all in all, looking pretty beige, off-white, white, the old Richie Beno thing, but yeah, not much happening at all. All right, let's stick back on the sat pick for you. Take some questions, and I'll shut the hell up, and you can all go off to your Sunday night, whatever's going on for you. That polar low is looking nice. In fact, it's probably that we see popping through Monday, Tuesday, maybe. Some of this cold air associated with the back end of that. Maybe the westerlies you can see here. I'll go across to the Indian. It's dead as well, like a shallow low here, but there's really no long way troughs at all. What you want to see, and we should be seeing, is that these sort of features here have like a cloud band that goes way back up almost into Africa, and you can see there's really nothing at all. And even the tropics are sort of dead. You can see this cluster of stuff over towards the Horn of Africa, which is where, this is why the Bureau may be sort of tending to lean towards that sort of positive idea. But then you can see there's still some convection across here too, and dead quiet here, but it's not unusual for this time of year as well. So, especially with the trade winds sort of kicking in, and you can see pretty nasty typhoon just plowed right into China, and you can see the Bay of Bengal obviously plumping away like it normally does this time of year. But by and all, if I were to look here and you'd say it is dead. This is probably Thursday's Friday stuff here. Probably Thursday stuff actually. But you can see there's no real cloud band. Now this is interesting here. We'll obviously keep an eye on it. That's a different system right behind it. So really nothing like you want to be seeing some sort of Rossby wave building across here, and this could be one building because you can see here it backs way up into the Atlantic there, which is a good sign, but it's a long way away, so things will change and things. All right, well, let's stick up your old questions graph, and let's get into your questions. And so hello everybody. Hello, Rachel. Lovely to see you. Mr. Mayor, lovely to see you. I did get your message, sorry, before I was actually preparing this graph today, and then I totally forgot to reply, as I do lately. I do apologize, but thank you, and I hope you are fabulous too. That low near WA is, yeah, absolutely beautiful. Love polar lows. It's just the structure is so clean because everything's sort of pushed away from the circulation, like this. The the low level circulation center, so you get to see a lot of structure with polar lows. Whereas obviously with warm chord lows, it's obviously got a central dense overcast. Well, that's that cloud mass you can see, and very rarely you can see to the surface until it spins up and you get an eye. And otherwise, yeah, polar lows, nut, you get to see the guts of it. Your wattles are blooming and your jasmine already. So that's interesting. Yeah, that's not surprising. It's pretty reflection of August. You are welcome, Mr. Mayor, anytime. And again, you need your lawns or your merkins trimmed, definitely check out the Doctor of Lawns out at Camden. 10% discount for anybody who mentions Sydney Weather Nerds. And I think he even gives a 5% discount more if he wears red speeders. But I've just heard that. I've heard that in gossip. I don't know if that's fact or not. You have to ask Mr. Mayor himself. Mr. Preston, lovely to see you. I hope you are well up there in downtown Hunterville, pretty as dry as a donkey's like we are here. Kids back at school, so pissed parents. Yeah. It's quite a heat too, I can say, which has been great. My last manager was deleted because I said another site for someone. Lawn Doctor Cam on the usual sites. Yeah, I think it was last week I saw someone had a post on Facebook of the radar from Windy, and we're using that as a forecast model to say that Mounds are in for a big slump of snow this weekend. Yeah, I think you did mention that, Rachel, didn't you? Next, flick me those sort of stuff via DMs, because then I'm happy to use that as well. Because obviously I don't get to see everything. I try and get across as much as I can, but often busy. But yeah, please, if you got you've got anything that's for the WTFs for the weekends, please flick it through. Often I do a search of the, obviously the bubbling topics, which is like mega death El Nino. I think my search term was. Didn't return many returns this week, so obviously people aren't talking about it as much. And of course, ECL is always a common one I throw in, but there's obviously a lot of still a misconception out there about what actually constitutes an East Coast low and what it does. And 99.9% of the time, it's a Tasman low and not an ECL. So it tends to sort of catch people's attention, and so they read it and go, "Oh, that's just a Tasman low." I go camping. Hello, Mr. I go camping. Hope you are well out there. I hope you got your. Did you get your new desktop at all built yet, or are you still in the process of building that? And did you get to keep your laptop? That's more important, hopefully, because these days RAM and processors are worth absolute gold, given the the international shortage of processors and stuff like that. No red speedos, lol. Well, maybe they might pay you more, Mr. Mayor. That is about it. We can see that next week is going to be pretty much copy and paste right through until maybe sort of Thursday/Friday. It does look like it's going to get cold Thursday, so we might see again a sort of burst of wintry weather. But with that Sam the way it is, not much at this stage. No ID, and Enzo pillaging the tropical areas and starting to starve us of moisture slowly but surely. Yeah, and we'll see exactly how that plays out in spring. We will have, yes, please send me photos. I want to see this desktop that you built, and if you've got the laptop kept as well. So anyway, goes FYI, I go camping. His young man smashed his expensive laptop, so luckily he's a clever man and has everything insured, of course, and so he got to build himself up, which is obviously the dream of anybody who's into a bit of a geeky stuff, build his own desktop with some decent specs. So I'm very interested to see exactly what he got for that, in saying that, but yeah, I'm looking forward to those pictures. All right, I have to get rushing very soon. Thank you for your company. Let's look forward to your copy paste week ahead, and then we'll obviously keep you appraised of what's happening on Thursday/Friday, whether there's going to be any sort of moisture with this front, or it's just going to be damn cold and savage westerlies, because it is coming to that time of year when the westerlies do like to pay us a visit. Thanks so much for your support as usual, and have an amazing week. We'll obviously be in touch. See you in the morning. Tonight's temps won't be as cold, but I think it'll still be around sort of. The interesting thing is that quickly, we better zoom in and quickly cover that. There is that cloud moving in from the west that I did give you a heads up about. So it's slowly and surely coming across, which means that, the west there's even a little bit of shower down there now. I don't know, that's just actually out near the lawn doctor. So it's actually showering out your way at the moment because it says in here there is, and it looks like it's probably actually just a bit of moisture near the surface, probably maybe even a bit of Virgo. But there's no high cloud. You can see like the clouds are very, very low. So maybe even a fire out their way. Is there a fire out your way, Mr. Mayor? Because that could definitely be fire smoke. Looking at that, um, yeah. Oh, hello, Deborah. Lovely to see you too. I hope you're fantastic. All right, I'm going to stop yapping because otherwise I'll hang around with you guys all night. And I've got domestic chores I have to do. Otherwise, I'll be in the doghouse. And I mean, it'll just continue status, I guess. No, I'm just joking. I don't get the doghouse. The better half is actually very patient, which is incredibly unusual because I am not. Have an awesome day, awesome night. Catch you in the morning. It said temps tonight. Well, at this stage it was looking 2 to 9 degrees, 2 in the west, obviously down, and then to 9 on the coast. But that cloud is looking a little bit thicker than I think the models expected. So it may be maybe 5. Oh, 5 or 6. Actually, I say 5 or 6? I did nice. Actually, I said 5 or 6, didn't I? Yeah, 5 to 12 tonight this morning. Damn, I can't remember my own forecast. Yeah, it's going to be milder tonight. So don't expect to get too cozy with the your old Duna. I'm trying to find what the forecast is, but I can't find it anyway. So goodbye, Canva. Yeah, it'll be milder, bit of cloud around, a bit more humidity as it raises tomorrow. If you got haggard hair tomorrow, it'll be a bit stronger. So those who suffer the old frizz, just get some of your product ready. Otherwise, I'm going to stop it now because otherwise we're here all night. Thank you for your company. Have a great evening. Ciao.